Have you ever found yourself just completely exhausted, literally twisting your words into knots, trying desperately to explain your heart to someone who just didn't want to hear it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we've all been there.
Right. Picture it for a second. It's late at night, you're standing there, maybe leaning against your kitchen counter, just staring at your phone,
Hmm.
and you're watching those three little gray typing bubbles appear and then disappear and appear again on the screen.
It's the worst feeling.
It really is. Your chest feels tight, your heart rate is elevated, and you are typing out this long, you know, paragraph-heavy text message.
Yeah, carefully editing every single word.
Exactly, meticulously editing it. You're pouring all of your energy, your empathy, your absolute best emotional vocabulary into trying to make this person see your perspective.
Right.
And then you hit send, and the response you get back just completely ignores the core of what you just shared.
Yeah, it misses the mark entirely.
It's like the harder you try to explain, the more you realize you're basically speaking into an absolute void. You walk away from the exchange feeling physically drained, entirely empty, and yet profoundly misunderstood.
It's a remarkably universal experience, you
Yeah.
know, and it's physically taxing.
It really is physical, isn't it?
It is. That feeling you just described, that tightness in the chest, the elevated heart rate, that is literally your autonomic nervous system going into overdrive,
Wow. Just from a text message.
just from a text message.
Mm.
Because biologically speaking, we are wired as social creatures to seek understanding.
Right.
For early humans, being understood and accepted by the tribe meant survival. Being misunderstood meant alienation, and, well, alienation meant death.
That's intense. So it's a literal survival mechanism.
Exactly. So we spend almost our entire youth and young adulthood operating under this like primal mandate to be perfectly understood by the world. It's a survival mechanism disguised as communication.
Okay, that makes so much sense.
But what we're going to explore today is the profound, almost silent shift that happens as we age and mature.
Yes, that transition.
Right. It's the moment you realize that the massive amount of energy you're spending trying to forge that understanding is actually destroying your inner peace. We're looking at the transition from seeking external approval to finding internal equilibrium.
And that is the exact mission of our deep dive today. We are looking at a very short, very powerful piece of writing that's been circulating. It's titled simply, "The older you get, the less you want to explain."
It's a brilliant piece.
It really is. Our goal for this conversation is to take this text and really, live inside it for a while. We're going to explore the deeper meaning behind these words.
The psychological mechanisms at play.
Exactly. We want to uncover why letting go of that desperate need to explain yourself isn't giving up. It is actually one of the most freeing, empowering lessons you can ever learn. So if you're listening to this, maybe you're commuting or, winding down for the evening or taking a quiet walk, just settle in. Let this be a moment of reflection for you.
Mm-hmm.
I want to start right at the core of the frustration. Why is it so incredibly hard to communicate our true intentions in the first place? I mean, if two people speak the same language, why does it feel like such a heavy, impossible lift?
Well, it feels impossible because we operate under a very persistent, fundamental illusion about how human communication actually works.
Okay, what do you mean by illusion?
We move through the world assuming that communication is just a matter of finding the right words. We treat it like an intellectual puzzle.
Oh, like if I just find the perfect combination of words, they'll get it.
Exactly. We think if I could just find the perfect vocabulary, the right tone, the right syntax, the other person's mind will unlock like a safe and they'll see my exact intention.
I definitely do that. I over-edit my words thinking that's the key.
Right. But communication isn't just about the signal you are broadcasting. It is heavily dependent on the receiver's hardware,
Their hardware?
their capacity, and more importantly, their willingness to tune into your frequency.
Wait, let me stop you there. What do you mean by their hardware and their willingness? Because it feels like if I'm speaking clearly, they should just hear me.
Think of it like a radio transmission. You are broadcasting a beautiful, complex symphony in FM,
Okay.
but the person you're talking to has their internal receiver set to AM.
Oh, wow.
And not only is it set to AM, but the dial is stuck. It doesn't matter how loudly you turn up the volume of your explanation or how eloquently you describe the music.
They just can't hear it.
They literally lack the current hardware configuration to receive that frequency.
That is such a good analogy.
When we try to deeply explain our true intentions, we're essentially asking the other person to drop their ego, dismantle their preconceptions, and lower their own defensive walls just to witness us objectively.
And people don't want to do that.
No, the psychological reality is that most people are not equipped or simply not willing to do that intense emotional labor for you, especially if it challenges their own worldview.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because that analogy, the radio analogy, it shifts the entire burden of proof.
Yes, it does.
It means the failure to connect isn't necessarily because I didn't explain it well enough. It's because they aren't tuned to receive it.
Exactly.
And that brings us directly to the opening lines of the source material. The text begins with this, and I quote, "The older you get, the less you want to explain yourself. Not because you no longer care, but because you finally understand that not everyone wants to understand you."
That's a powerful statement.
It is. That line, "not everyone wants to understand you," is honestly a really tough pill to swallow because it implies intentionality. It implies that being misunderstood isn't just a miscommunication. Sometimes it is the other person's active choice.
What's fascinating here is the text's careful distinction between apathy and wisdom.
Right.
It explicitly states, not because you no longer care. Society often frames stepping back from an argument as becoming bitter or cynical or just, shutting down emotionally.
Like you're giving up on the relationship.
Exactly. But the text argues the exact opposite. You still care deeply about your relationships, your integrity, your own heart.
Yeah.
What you stop caring about is the futile exercise of forcing someone to see you when they have their eyes firmly, deliberately shut.
That makes a lot of sense.
You begin to understand that understanding requires mutual consent. If the other person does not consent to understanding you, if they are committed to misunderstanding you because it serves a specific narrative they need to believe, then all your explanations are just wasted breath.
I hear that, but I have to push back a little here.
Sure.
Isn't it a bit cynical to assume people want to misunderstand us? I mean, I want to believe the best in my friends and family. Why would someone actively choose to misunderstand someone they care about?
Well, it's not usually malicious, and that's the tricky part. It's an unconscious defense mechanism.
An unconscious defense mechanism. Okay.
Yeah, the text gives us the exact anatomy of this dynamic by breaking down 3 specific types of listeners that drain us.
Right, the 3 types.
First, it says some people only listen to reply. Second, some people only hear what they want to hear. And third, some people have already judged you before you even speak.
Those are brutally accurate.
If we look at the psychology behind these 3 types, we can see exactly why people choose misunderstanding. Let's look at the first one. People who only listen to reply. Psychologists refer to this as conversational narcissism.
Conversational narcissism. That sounds intense. What does that actually look like in a daily interaction?
It looks like an interaction where the other person's brain is entirely occupied with formulating the rebuttal while you are still speaking.
Oh, I hate that.
Right. They aren't actually absorbing the emotional weight or the factual content of your words. They're just listening to their own internal monologue. It usually stems from anxiety, insecurity, or a fragile ego. They are so focused on how they're going to respond, how they can sound smart, or how they can defend their position, that the space between your words isn't a space of absorption for them.
What is it to them?
To use a somewhat visceral metaphor, when you are pouring your heart out, their silence isn't the silence of deep listening. It's the silence of loading a weapon.
The silence of loading a weapon. Wow, that is exactly the vibe.
You know it when you see it.
You literally can see it in their eyes. They get this glazed, impatient look, and they are practically vibrating, just waiting for you to take a breath so they can jump in with, well, actually, or, but what about when you did this?
Yes.
It is completely exhausting because you aren't in a dialogue at that point. You are just providing the raw material for their monologue.
Precisely. And that leads directly to the mechanism behind the second type of listener the text mentions. Some people only hear what they want to hear.
Right.
This happens because of 2 very powerful neurological functions, cognitive dissonance and confirmation bias.
Okay, we hear those terms thrown around a lot. Break them down for us in the context of, like, this text message argument we were imagining. How do cognitive dissonance and confirmation bias literally change the words someone hears?
Well, the human brain is a meaning-making machine. But it is also an incredibly lazy machine.
Lazy?
Yeah, it consumes a lot of calories and energy to process new information, especially information that contradicts what it already believes.
Okay.
This is where cognitive dissonance comes in. Cognitive dissonance is the severe psychological discomfort we feel when we hold two conflicting beliefs.
It literally feels uncomfortable.
It does. To eliminate that discomfort and conserve energy, the brain uses confirmation bias. It actively filters out information that challenges its existing narrative and hyper-focuses on anything that confirms it.
So wait, if someone already has a pre-existing storyline about me, my words literally get warped by their brain before they even process them.
Exactly. Let's say you have a coworker, or maybe a family member, who has unconsciously cast you in the role of the difficult one or the aggressor.
Right, they've made up their mind.
And they view themselves as the perpetual victim. It would require a massive amount of cognitive and emotional energy for them to dismantle that identity.
That makes sense.
So if you come to them with a vulnerable, completely reasonable explanation of your feelings, their brain cannot accept it as reasonable without triggering that painful cognitive dissonance.
Wow.
To protect themselves, their brain acts as a distorted filter. If you say something kind, they'll hear it as condescending. If you set a boundary, they'll hear it as an attack.
That's terrifying.
They are not hearing your words. They are hearing their own fears and insecurities projected back at them in your voice. You simply cannot explain your way out of someone else's projection.
That is deeply unsettling, but it makes so much sense. It's like having a warped mirror. No matter how perfectly you dress up your explanation, the mirror is always going to show a funhouse reflection.
That's a great way to put it.
Which is a perfect bridge to the third type.
Yeah.
Some people have already judged you before you even speak. This one feels the most unfair. You walk into a room, and the gavel has already banged. The verdict is in. I'm thinking about why we spend so much time trying to be understood by these specific people. If they are warped mirrors, why do we keep standing in front of them?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at a behavioral loop known as JADE.
Yay.
Yes, JADE. It stands for justify, argue, defend, and explain.
Justify, argue, defend, explain. Okay.
When we encounter someone who has already judged us, our trauma responses often kick in. As we discussed earlier, being misunderstood feels dangerous on a primal level.
Right, the whole survival thing.
So we scramble, we over-explain, we write the 3-page emails, we engage in JD behavior because we are desperately trying to assert our reality. We think, if I just justify my actions better, if I argue more logically, if I defend my character, if I explain my history, they will have to change their judgment.
Wait, I need to jump in here.
Sure.
Because justifying and explaining yourself, that sounds like just, normal conflict resolution. If my partner completely misunderstands why I'm upset, shouldn't I justify, argue, defend, and explain my position? How is JDE behavior different from just healthy communication?
It's a crucial distinction. Healthy communication is a two-way street based on mutual curiosity.
Mutual curiosity, I like that.
You explain your feelings to a partner who is genuinely curious and open to updating their understanding of you.
Right.
JDE behavior, on the other hand, is a compulsive, anxiety-driven response to a closed system.
The closed system.
It's what you do when the other person has already demonstrated they are committed to their judgment. You are performing for an audience that has already given you a thumbs down.
Ouch.
The text we are analyzing is pointing out that emotional maturity is the realization that, as an adult, another person's unfair judgment is not an actual threat to your survival.
So it's the difference between sharing your perspective with someone who wants to know you versus submitting evidence to a hostile jury.
Beautifully put, yes. When someone has judged you before you even speak, your words become completely meaningless to them. Continuing to JD in that scenario is not communication. It's self-harm.
Self-harm. Wow.
Giving up the need to explain yourself to a hostile jury is not a failure of communication. It is the beginning of self-preservation.
Self-preservation. I really love that framing. And the source text moves exactly into that territory next. It talks about how we take that energy back.
It does.
The author writes, so you stop wasting your energy trying to prove your heart. You stop explaining your choices to people who haven't walked your path. Let's pause on that specific phrase. Proving your heart. It implies this incredibly heavy burden. It's exactly what you just said. Like, you are on trial for your own character.
Yeah.
And you have to present evidence to people who have absolutely no context for the terrain you've had to navigate.
The topography of a human life is incredibly complex. Every single decision you make today is informed by every joy, every trauma, every micro-failure, and every quiet success you have ever experienced. When you try to explain a major life choice to someone who hasn't walked your path, let's say, why you walked away from a career that looked highly prestigious from the outside.
Oh, that's a big one.
Or why you ended a relationship that everyone else thought was fine. or why you are choosing to parent your children differently than your family did.
Right.
You are trying to compress decades of lived, visceral, highly nuanced experience into a 5-minute summary.
And it's impossible. You can't put a 30-year emotional novel into a text message.
And you can't. And when they inevitably look at you with confusion, or worse, with that subtle, condescending judgment, the human impulse is to try harder,
Right, to dig deeper.
to metaphorically bleed a little bit more right there on the floor to show them your truth. The wisdom of getting older is looking at that person, recognizing their lack of context,
Yeah.
and internally saying, you cannot understand this because you haven't lived it,
Yeah.
and I no longer require your comprehension to validate my reality.
I no longer require your comprehension to validate my reality. If we could just inject that sentence into our veins.
It's powerful.
Because reality is messy. And the text gets very specific about the messy things we need to stop defending. It lists 4 very intimate, very internal states, it says. You stop defending your silence, your distance, your healing, and your growth. Let's take these one by one because they trigger so much guilt in us. First, your silence. Think about a time you just needed to be quiet. Maybe you're at a family dinner or in a meeting, and you just don't have the bandwidth to engage.
Yeah.
Someone inevitably leans over and demands, why are you being so quiet? What's wrong? Why is silence so offensive to people, and why do we feel an immediate need to apologize for it?
Silence is deeply unsettling to a lot of people because it acts as a psychological mirror.
A mirror.
When you are silent, you stop providing the ambient noise that distracts other people from themselves.
Oh, wow.
The other person is left alone with their own thoughts, their own insecurities, and their own internal static. In a modern society that equates constant, rapid-fire communication with connection and productivity, choosing silence is often perceived as a withdrawal, almost an act of covert hostility.
Right. People assume you are mad at them. They assume your silence is a weapon.
Exactly. They demand you fill the space so they don't have to face the void. When you feel compelled to defend your silence, you are essentially apologizing for not managing their anxiety.
That is mind-blowing. Apologizing for not managing their anxiety.
When the text says you stop defending your silence, it means you recognize that your internal peace does not require a public soundtrack. You are allowed to simply exist. You do not owe the world a constant broadcast of your internal state.
Yes. And that ties seamlessly into the second word, your distance. This is huge. We live in an era where everyone is accessible 24/7. Your phone is constantly pinging with emails, messages, group chats.
It never stops.
There is this immense crushing pressure to be available. If you pull back, if you don't reply to a text for a day, or you gently distance yourself from a friend group that is draining you, you are immediately interrogated. You are asked to provide a thesis paper on your absence. But distance isn't inherently malicious. It's often just a boundary.
Distance is the physical or temporal manifestation of a boundary. And here's a psychological truth you can bank on. People who have historically benefited from you having no boundaries will always view your new boundaries as a personal attack.
A personal attack.
They will demand you explain your distance because they want to argue you out of it. Let's go back to those typing bubbles. When you step back from a chaotic group chat, the people in that chat will demand an explanation because they want to pull you back into the dynamic that served them, even if it drained you.
Okay, I have to play a devil's advocate again here.
Go for it.
Because I hear protect your peace and create distance a lot on the internet. But when does protecting my peace just turn into being a flaky, unreliable friend? I mean, if I'm always distancing myself and refusing to explain why, aren't I just emotionally abandoning people?
That is a phenomenal question.
Yeah.
The difference between a healthy boundary and emotional abandonment lies in the intent and the pattern. A wall is built out of fear to keep everyone out permanently. A boundary is a gate you use to regulate your energy so you can actually show up effectively when you choose to.
Okay, I love that. A gate, not a wall.
The text isn't advocating for ghosting people or refusing to communicate your basic needs. It is talking about the people who demand you justify your need for space.
Right.
A healthy friend might say, hey, haven't heard from you. Hope you're okay. And you could say, just needing some quiet time this week. A healthy friend accepts that.
Yeah.
The people you stop explaining yourself to are the ones who reply with, why? What did I do? Why are you acting like this? You're being so distant. So this raises an important question for you, the listener. How much of your life have you spent apologizing for simply stepping out of the arena to catch your breath?
That's a great question.
You do not owe anyone unrestricted access to your emotional reserves.
You do not owe anyone unrestricted access. That is the core of it. Which brings us to the third and fourth states we stop defending your healing and your growth.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on the surface, this sounds counterintuitive. You would think that healing and growing are universally celebrated. You'd think your friends and family would be your biggest cheerleaders. But anyone who has ever gone to therapy or quit drinking or started setting serious boundaries knows that healing actually upsets a lot of apple carts. Why do we end up having to explain or defend our healing to the people closest to us?
To understand this, we have to look at family systems theory.
Family systems theory.
Yes. Every family, or tight-knit friend group, operates as a system that relies on homeostasis, meaning it wants to stay in its familiar balance, even if that balance is highly toxic.
Oh, wow.
Within that system, everyone is assigned a role. Maybe you're the fixer or the people pleaser or the scapegoat or the dumping ground for everyone's anxiety.
I know exactly what you mean. The person everyone calls to complain to, but nobody asks how they are doing.
Exactly. Now, what happens when that person starts healing? What happens when they go to therapy, realize their worth, and refuse to play the role of the dumping ground anymore?
This system breaks down.
The entire system is thrown into chaos.
Yeah.
The homeostasis is broken. Your growth literally threatens their comfort. So instead of cheering you on, they will try to shame you back into your old role. They will say things like, "You've changed," or "Therapy is making you so selfish," or "You used to be so much more easygoing."
Which is just code for you used to be more easier to control.
Precisely. They demand an explanation for your growth because your new boundaries are forcing them to confront their own unhealed wounds.
Yeah.
They want you to defend why you are prioritizing your mental health over their convenience.
And the urge to JD, justify, argue, defend, explain is so strong here. Because we love these people. We want to bring them along with us on the growth journey. We want to say, no, wait, let me explain the psychology of why I can't engage in this gossip anymore. Let me explain why I'm reading these books.
Right, we want to save them too.
We think if we just explain it well enough, they will heal too. But the text delivers this massive anchoring line to stop us in our tracks. Because peace becomes more important than being misunderstood.
That sentence is the crux of the entire philosophy. Peace becomes more important than being misunderstood. For decades, we operate under the delusion that being misunderstood is the worst possible outcome in any interaction. We view it as a tragedy.
Yeah, we really do.
But emotional maturity is the realization that sacrificing your peace to force someone to understand you is the actual tragedy. You are trading your own internal equilibrium for the fleeting, unreliable hope of external validation.
Wow.
When you prioritize peace, you are making a conscious, deliberate choice to look at someone and say, internally, I'm entirely okay with you having a wrong opinion about me.
I am okay with you having a wrong opinion about me. That is so incredibly hard to do. It requires so much emotional fortitude to let an incorrect narrative about you just sit there in the air uncorrected.
It takes immense strength.
But the relief, the sheer lightness of putting down the burden of explanation, it's like realizing you don't have to be the PR manager for your own life anymore.
The PR manager for your own life. That's a brilliant way to frame it. Think of the immense overhead cost of running a PR firm for your identity.
It's exhausting.
Issuing press releases every time you make a decision, managing optics, doing damage control because a relative misunderstood your tone. It is a full-time job that pays terribly.
It pays terribly.
Resigning from that job is the essence of what this source material is advocating.
So if we resign from the PR firm, if we officially stop explaining ourselves to the world, it begs a really terrifying question. How do we know who actually belongs in our lives? If we aren't constantly communicating and justifying and smoothing things over, how do we connect?
That's the fear, isn't it?
Yeah. But the text actually gives us a beautiful answer for this. It draws a stark, unmissable line between what it calls the right people and the wrong people.
It does. And it's important to note that it frames this not necessarily as a moral judgment of good versus evil, but as a judgment of deep compatibility and energetic resonance.
Okay, tell me more about that.
The text says, you begin to realize that the right people do not need long explanations. They feel your truth. They respect your journey. They give you space to become who you are. This is the textbook definition of a secure attachment.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. Look at the specific wording. They feel your truth. It does not say they intellectually comprehend every nuance of your psychological state. It says they feel it.
Yeah.
I want you, the listener, to think about a relationship in your life right now. Maybe it's a best friend you've had for years, or a partner or a mentor, where you can just walk into the room, drop your bags, sigh, and they just know. You don't have to break out a whiteboard and give a presentation on why you are exhausted. You just say, it's been a day, and they say, I know. Do you want to talk about it, or do you just want to order takeout and watch a movie? There's no demand for a thesis, there's just space.
That space is the hallmark of safety. When the text says they give you space to become who you are, it is touching on the very core of healthy love.
Healthy love.
The right people don't view you as a static, finished product that they have figured out and cataloged. They view you as a dynamic, evolving human being.
Right.
Therefore, when you change your mind, when you start healing, when you need distance, they don't demand a frantic explanation because they aren't inherently threatened by your evolution. They respect your journey because they recognize it as yours. Now, let's look at the biology of this because it's fascinating.
Oh, I love the biology part.
Interacting with the right people actually downregulates your nervous system.
Wait, explain that. How does a person downregulate my nervous system just by not asking for an explanation?
It has to do with your vagus nerve and what psychologists call neuroception.
Neuroception.
Yeah, it's your brain's subconscious scanning of the environment for safety or danger. When you are with someone who demands you explain and defend yourself, your body perceives a threat. Cortisol is released, your heart rate goes up, your muscles tense, you armor up.
Right, you get ready for battle.
But when you are with someone who feels your truth, your vagus nerve sends a signal to your heart, your lungs, and your gut that you are safe. Your heart rate literally slows down. Your digestion regulates. The feeling of being felt rather than just analyzed creates a somatic marker of safety in your body.
Wow.
You aren't just emotionally relaxed, you are biologically safe.
A somatic marker of safety. That makes so much sense because you can literally feel the physical difference in your body. Around certain people, you can feel your shoulders drop 2 inches away from your ears.
Exactly.
But then we flip the coin. The text addresses the other side of the spectrum. It says, and the wrong people, no explanation will ever be enough for them. This is the absolute definition of a rigged game.
It is.
If no explanation will ever be enough, then playing the game at all is just pure self-sabotage.
It is self-sabotage. And again, recognizing who the wrong people are isn't about condemning them as fundamentally evil people. It simply means they are the wrong people for you in this specific chapter of your life, because the dynamic requires you to constantly justify your basic existence.
Yeah.
If someone's worldview or their ego requires you to be small or confused or compliant, then no amount of rational, articulate, perfectly crafted explanation will ever convince them to see you as big, clear, and autonomous.
So it's not a communication problem at all. It's a control problem.
Exactly. You could hire the greatest debate team on earth, bring in peer-reviewed studies, and present a flawless argument for your boundaries, and they would still find a flaw. Because their goal isn't understanding. Their goal is maintaining control of the narrative.
That is wild.
You cannot use logic to talk someone out of a position they used emotion and ego to get into.
Oof. Say that again.
You cannot use logic to talk someone out of a position they used emotion and ego to get into. When you truly internalize that no explanation will ever be enough, you experience a very specific psychological process.
What happens?
First, there's grief. The grief of realizing you will never be fully seen by this person you might care deeply about.
Yeah, that hurts.
But that grief is followed very quickly by immense liberation. You realize that your silence isn't a failure to communicate. It is the only logical, rational response to an unwinnable situation.
Yes. The text says exactly that. So you learn to speak less, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. I want to really highlight this because society constantly blasts us with the opposite message. We are told that speaking up is power. We are told to use our voice, to never let someone have the last word, to always correct the record online or in person.
Right, fight back at all costs.
Exactly. If someone says something untrue about you, the absolute knee-jerk instinct is to fight back. So choosing to deliberately speak less can initially feel like you are rolling over. It can feel like weakness. But the text reframes this entirely.
It reframes it because our culture has a very adolescent view of what power is. Yeah. We think power is controlling what other people think. But true power is the absolute mastery of your own internal reactions.
Oh.
When you frantically try to correct the record, when you get into a war of words in an Instagram comment section or a family text thread, you are actually handing your power over to the other person. You are saying, my emotional state depends on you agreeing with my version of reality. That is a very weak, Very precarious position to operate from.
Because you're outsourcing your peace to someone who might actively want to disturb it.
Exactly. Wisdom is recognizing the futility of the exercise. Wisdom is looking at the situation and saying, you are committed to misunderstanding me, and I am committed to my peace. We have mutually exclusive goals, and therefore I'm removing myself from the negotiation.
I am removing myself from the negotiation. That is so empowering.
Speaking less is an act of supreme self-containment. It is a realization that your truth remains true, regardless of whether or not the person across from you acknowledges it. The objective facts of your character do not change, just because someone else refuses to read them.
This shifts the whole paradigm. It takes the focus completely off of the other person's behavior and puts it entirely back onto your own agency, which leads to a series of conscious choices that the source material lays out for us. It gives us this beautiful three-part manifesto for how to interact with the world once you possess this wisdom. It says, you choose calm over conflict, distance over drama, peace over approval.
It's a wonderful summary.
So what does this actually look like in our daily lives? Let's bring this right down to the pavement. Because choosing calm over conflict sounds incredibly poetic in a deep dive, but in practice, when your blood is boiling because someone just totally misrepresented you in a meeting, choosing calm feels nearly impossible.
It feels impossible because you are fighting millions of years of evolution. Our biological hardwiring wants conflict. When we feel misrepresented or attacked, the amygdala, the fear center of our brain, fires up.
Right.
It hijacks our prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for logical thinking. Our fight-or-flight response is triggered. Cortisol and adrenaline flood our system, and our brain is screaming at us to engage, to defend our territory, to strike back.
So how do we actually do that, though, when the adrenaline is pumping?
This is where we can borrow heavily from Stoic philosophy.
Yeah.
Thinkers like Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius wrote extensively about this exact dilemma thousands of years ago. The core tenet of Stoicism is the dichotomy of control.
The dichotomy of control. Okay.
We cannot control external events. We cannot control what people think of us, the unfair assumptions they make, or the toxic dynamics they try to draw us into. The only thing we have absolute undisputed dominion over is our own response. Choosing calm over conflict means you look at the provocation, you recognize the amygdala hijack happening in your body, and you consciously override it. You decide that engaging will only drain your vital energy. As the saying goes, you refuse to attend every argument you are invited to.
Refuse to attend every argument you are invited to. I love the visual of that. It's like receiving an engraved invitation to a screaming match, and you just calmly check the will not attend box and put it in the mail.
Exactly. RSVP, no.
Which brings us to the second choice in the manifesto, distance over drama. Think about a recent moment where you felt sucked into the vortex of drama. Maybe it was a Thanksgiving dinner where two relatives started baiting each other, or a toxic workplace chat that loves to gossip. The instinct is to get in the mud and try to clean it up, or to pick a side. What if instead you just took a step back? What if you had just chosen distance? We tend to think of distance as running away, but it's really just elevation, isn't it?
Distance is perspective. Drama requires proximity to survive. It requires you to be physically or emotionally in the center of the storm, getting battered by the wind and the rain.
Yeah.
When you choose distance, you are stepping out of the storm and watching it from a safe vantage point on a hill. You realize that the storm will rage whether you are standing in the middle of it getting soaked or whether you are sitting inside with a cup of tea. So you might as well seek shelter.
That's a great way to look at it.
Furthermore, drama is very often a dysfunctional substitute for genuine intimacy. People who cannot connect through vulnerability and love will often try to connect through shared conflict and gossip.
Oh, that is so true. Bonding over mutual dislike.
Right. When you refuse to engage in the drama, when you create physical or emotional distance, you are starving that dysfunctional dynamic of the oxygen it needs. You are signaling, I am available for genuine connection, but I am no longer available to be a participant in chaos.
And that leads perfectly into the final, and I think the most difficult choice. Peace over approval. This is the big boss level of emotional maturity. We are raised from birth on a steady diet of approval. Gold stars in kindergarten, good grades in high school, performance reviews at work, and the absolute slot machine addiction of likes and comments on social media. It's everywhere. We are biologically and socially addicted to approval. So how do we choose peace over something we are addicted to?
This raises the most important question for everyone listening to this deep dive. What is the actual hidden cost of the approval you are currently seeking?
The hidden cost.
Because approval is almost never free. You usually have to barter away a piece of your authentic self to purchase it. You have to quiet your opinions, modify your boundaries, perform a version of yourself that makes others comfortable, or exhaust yourself explaining your life choices, all just to get someone to nod and say, okay, you're doing the right thing.
You're paying for their approval with your own vitality.
Exactly. Psychologically, seeking approval means you are operating with an external locus of control. This means your emotional state, your happiness, your sense of worth is entirely dependent on outside forces and the whims of other people.
Right. If they approve, you feel good. If they disapprove, you crash.
Precisely. Seeking peace, however, requires an internal locus of control. Peace is entirely within your own jurisdiction. You do not need anyone's permission, agreement, or understanding to choose peace. You have to be willing to withstand the initial discomfort of letting go of the addiction to being validated.
It's like realizing you've been holding onto a rope that's pulling you toward a cliff edge. You are terrified to let go because holding the rope is all you know. It's burning your hands, it's painful, but you hold on. And the realization is that the only way to save yourself is to just let go. You will fall a few inches, hit the solid ground, and the struggle is instantly over.
That's a beautiful analogy.
And that brings us to the final overarching lesson of this deeply moving piece of writing. The author wraps everything up with this powerful anchoring conclusion, because growing older teaches you one quiet truth. You do not have to be understood by everyone to live a meaningful life. Sometimes protecting your peace means actively letting people misunderstand you. Let's sit with that first part. You do not have to be understood by everyone to live a meaningful life.
The author calls it a quiet truth because it doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It usually arrives softly, after years of exhaustion, after you have finally tired yourself out trying to be the universal translator of your own soul.
The universal translator.
We often conflate being understood with being worthy. We think, if everyone around me understands and agrees with my choices, then my life is valid. But history and psychology tell us the opposite. The most meaningful, impactful lives are very often the ones that are deeply misunderstood by the masses, at least initially.
Wow, that's true.
Innovators, artists, trailblazers, and on a more personal level, people who do the hard work of breaking generational family curses. They are rarely understood by the people around them in the moment. Their lives are deeply meaningful, not because they gained universal consensus, but because they stayed fiercely true to their internal compass.
That is so profoundly inspiring. You do not need a consensus to live your own life. You don't need a committee vote to be happy.
No, you don't.
And the final line, it is just the ultimate mic drop. Sometimes protecting your peace means letting people misunderstand you. Look at that active verb, letting them. Actively giving them permission to hold the wrong idea about who you are. That is wild.
It is the ultimate release of trying to control the uncontrollable. Letting people misunderstand you is perhaps the highest form of emotional confidence and self-respect a human being can attain.
The highest form.
It means you have looked inward, you have audited your own heart, you know your intentions are pure, and you have decided that your own self-knowing is entirely sufficient. You are no longer outsourcing your self-esteem. When you let someone misunderstand you, you are essentially handing them back their own baggage. You are quietly saying, your perception of me is a reflection of your own limits, not a reflection of my character. I'm going to politely decline the invitation to fix your distorted view, and I'm going to go over here and actually enjoy my life. Wow. It is a profound act of non-resistance. And in that non-resistance, you reclaim all of the energy you used to spend fighting.
You reclaim all of that energy. I want everyone listening to just imagine that for a second. Imagine what you could do with all the hours, all the mental bandwidth, all the emotional heavy lifting you've spent over the last 5, 10, 20 years trying to explain yourself to people who were determined to misunderstand you.
That's a lot of hours.
Imagine taking all of that stolen energy back and applying it to your passions, your actual friends, your art, your rest. That is what this deep dive is really about. It's not just an analysis of an internet quote. It's an invitation to take your life force back.
It really is.
It's a gentle hand on the shoulder saying, you can stop now. You don't have to explain it anymore. We really hope that as you've listened to this, as we've unpacked the biology and the psychology and the philosophy of this, you've felt a little bit of that massive weight lift off your shoulders. We hope you realize that your silence, your distance, your healing, and your growth belong to you and you alone. They do not require an audience, and they certainly don't require a defense attorney.
The transition from seeking universal understanding to embracing internal peace is exactly that. A transition, it's a lifelong practice. It won't happen overnight just from listening to a discussion.
Right? It's a process.
There will still be days where the old trauma instinct flares up, where you draft that long, desperate text message in your head while you're in the shower. But the difference is now you have the framework to recognize what's happening. You can recognize the JDE behavior. You can see the AM/FM radio mismatch. You can see the sealed cup. And you can consciously choose to keep your water. You can pause the amygdala hijack, and you can choose calm. You can choose distance. And most importantly, you can choose your own peace.
Absolutely. The framework changes everything. So as we wrap up this evening, as you go about the rest of your day, or as you settle into the quiet of the night, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. We started this conversation by picturing that utter exhaustion, that terrible feeling of desperately watching those typing bubbles, trying to pour your heart into a cup that is permanently sealed shut. So I want you to ask yourself, if you completely, totally gave up the need to be perfectly understood by the world tomorrow, what would you finally have the energy to do with your life? Think about it. Keep your water. Protect your peace. And until next time, take care of yourselves.